Good day, everyone, and welcome to another Savvius webinar. Today's topic will be on Savvius Omnipeek versus Wireshark. You get what you pay for. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our special guest today, and Joe Habib. Joe was kind enough to put together this presentation on Omnipeek and Wireshark, and he's an expert with both of those products and is going to do a great job today explaining what's the difference. Joe, that's enough from me. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. I think the big thing that everybody can't argue is free is always good. But the question is can you beat free, and what are really the key advantages of free, and what are the disadvantages of free? So I think when we look at things, I've been in the field, and I know probably many of the callers that are on the phone have been in the field and need something quick and need to be able to do a trace to understand what's going on. Being able to have that resource to be able to do a capture very quickly and get that data is many times invaluable. The question is once you have that data, what do you do with it? As everybody knows, time is money. So the amount of time that you're spending on a customer side, or the amount of time that you're actually trying to troubleshoot a issue of a system that's not working, that time has value, and you can't displace that value of your time, of an outage time, and so forth. So that's why we say, be careful with free. There are key advantages to it, but there are also some disadvantages to it in case. And as we're going through this, I want to kind of highlight some of the key advantages of where a paid product actually steps ahead of some of the free products out there. And you'll even notice that the manufacturers of the free product actually have a paid product that addresses some of the concerns that I'm going to bring up today as well. So one of the famous things that you may have heard is packets, they don't lie. And if you've ever looked at traces, there's plenty of data in there. So the question is how do you extract out that data? How do you know what's in that sea of packets or in that myriad of a trace file that could be enormous, and how do you actually make them make sense? How do you express that data to other people? For anybody who's on the phone who's done packet analysis, for us, it seems pretty simple. Trying to explain it to, and I use this as the example, trying to explain it to mom, that's like talking rocket science to them. So being able to have the tools that make it easy to explain or visualize what we're actually talking about makes it a much easier way to convey our point of exactly what's taking place, which takes me to the next slide here, which is about visualization. If you've ever looked at a packet decode, it's very text-based. There's not a lot of information, or let me take that back. There's actually too much information that you have to kind of go through and break down. As you know, the packet trace has the 7-layer model in there. You can see anywhere from the MAC address all the way to the application layer. Now the question is how do you dissect that information out? How do you visualize that to explain what's taking place? And how do you get those answers quickly? Kind of going back to the whole method of what is the difference between free and not free. Those are some of the key things that we're going to hit on when we look at a couple of different trace files today. We're not going to use too many trace files, probably just 2 simple ones, and go through some simple examples for you. So this is an interesting one that I like to talk about, but being aware of the half-truth, you may have gotten the wrong half. Performance is a key part in packet analysis. Networks are getting faster and faster today. Making sure that we have products that can keep up with network speeds, that can keep up with performance, and using the right product at the right time. On higher speeds, taking a laptop, running Wireshark, there's a very good chance you're going to be dropping packets. And when I high speed, I'm talking 100 gig networks, we're talking very high speed, where there's a chance. And obviously, if you've taken a trace and you're not getting the complete information, either because you've dropped packets, it can lead you to the wrong assumptions of what's actually occurring on the network. Being able to also be able to take it multi-segment areas and being able to take that information and kind of tie it back to, okay, I saw this data on this segment and this other segment. These are some of the key advantages. Multi-segment analysis isn't something I'll be going over today, but it's something that is, especially as networks get more complicated, they're designed for high redundancy and other things. It's a key aspect that you want to take into consideration. So performance really is a key advantage of some of the commercial products out there as well. So again, I like this little HAL example here because as we are having an abundance of packets in there, let's use the applications that we have to do the intelligence or the analysis that we would do. So for example, using experts, using statistics that give us an idea of what's actually taking place within the network helps and makes it easier for us to get answers quickly and be able to answer those questions. So without having to do calculations, you know, in the early days, you'd take a packet trace file and you'd actually try to calculate out what was taking place. Now there's statistics built in that allow us to build a much bigger and brighter picture of what's taking place. So without further ado, let's jump straight into a simple example. So I've got this little issues packet I'm going to bring up into Omnipeek. And there's a couple of things. This file that I'm bringing up is a 95 meg file. So we're going to look at it very quickly opening up in Omnipeek. And you're going to notice there is a little bit of a lag time as we open it up here, but we're going to notice how much of a lag time we're going to see also within Wireshark, and then as we try to get the statistical data as well. Unfortunately, normally when you open up a trace file, you would have been on this view. I'm going to jump to the peer map in a bit and explain to you why I jumped to that view. The key is at the top here, we've got kind of this statistical dashboard that gives us an idea of bandwidth traffic. The reason why I like to start or kind of express with this is, let's pretend this is a trace file where if I was in a Wireshark example, I'd have a bunch of packets like this. In fact, let's go into Wireshark and let's open up the same issues file. And we'll give it a second to load here as well. You'll notice same pretty lengthy load time. But even once this loads, what you're going to notice is I've got a bunch of packets. And where do I go from that set of packets? Within Wireshark, you have to know what questions you're about to ask. So let's take the simple question of bandwidth once this actually brings into the application, and we'll take a look at that. And this is where I wanted to emphasize kind of the timing, right? So we're dealing with, again, this is a 95 meg trace file. It's the part of we're on a high-speed network and we're trying to tell what's going on. So we'll go to statistics and we'll say, let's look at the I/O graph. And we waited all that calculation time for the product to go ahead and bring in those packets. And once they brought it in, we did a little bit more analysis to go ahead and get this graphic. So one thing that you'll see is the visualization of the I/O, right? So how much traffic is going in. Obviously, we can always change the measure, right, of what we're looking at, whether we're looking at bits or packets and so forth. But going back into Omnipeek, you can easily see, here we are, it's 20 megs. I don't have to think about it. It's just there. It's easy to visualize. It's easy to show. The other thing, if you're a packet person, you're looking at it, obviously right off the bat, you see all these ARP requests, and these ARPs are going out, and it looks like they're going in an incremental way. So it's a very easy trace when you're starting to look at what is actually occurring in here. You know, when machines are looking for other machines, they leverage ARP to go ahead and identify other machines on the network to identify their hardware address, right? How do I get to that machine? Typically, you have an ARP request and an ARP response, and it says, who are you? I'm here. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful. When you start seeing a repetitive ARP, all from the same machine, again, this network is not complicated, so it's as plain as day just jumping at us, we can see that taking place. And we would see exactly the same thing in Wireshark. Now the question becomes is if this came later on and this was interleaved within data like this is actually where we start to see the traffic ramp up. And what I'm really trying to do is use the packets, and as I scroll through to explain to you the picture of how the data of this trace, right, all these packets that are coming in, turn to visualization. So let's back up a little bit and let's focus on the ARP piece of it. So I'm going to jump back into Omnipeek, and I'm going to actually leverage the peer map to illustrate what I'm talking about. So one of the things that we talked about with ARP is we're going to go ahead and we're going to look for machines that are on the network that are not necessarily there or that may respond and so forth. The first thing that you'll see here is you'll see a bunch of gray indicators indicating that it's one-way traffic to us. So that helps me get an idea that there are a lot of machines that are trying to be communicated to that aren't necessarily. Again, the whole topic of this wasn't necessarily security-based, but in a security-type situation, this could be somewhat of a flag. This would indicate some type of network scanner that's taking place on our network. The interesting part that you also start to see from a visualization perspective is each color here that you see within the rainbow indicates a port that is being accessed. The chance of those ports being accessed on all of those machines simultaneously also to us indicates a port scan. So now we have to ask the question, okay, how would I figure out if a port scan is even going on within Wireshark? So we'll jump over into Wireshark, and the way that I would typically think about it is looking at statistics, and because we know that ports are based on protocols, we can look at we'll look at the endpoints, and we'll let this calculate out, and we'll look at TCP, and we'll get an idea of actually, sorry about that, statistics, where's protocol hierarchy? So we can see that there's a lot of different places to go ahead and get different views, but nothing jumps out at us and actually tells us what's taking place as far as a port or a protocol scan that is taking place on the network. Looking at, again, from a packet perspective, we can see that obviously the destinations are incrementing all from the same source. Again, this gives us the idea, oops, sorry. In the ARP, getting back to, we can see that ARPing from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that we're ARPing incrementally for addresses that take place in the network. So again, just jumping back and forth from a visualization perspective and leveraging kind of the peer map here, giving us an idea of what's taking place, using the utilization graph to show us, in this case, that we've had some type of network cap or bandwidth cap that may take place, or an application that is maxing out. One of the questions that becomes is, okay, well, what took place during this period of time? So we can always highlight this high bandwidth area, and we'll come back to the statistics area. And this will actually show us and give us a quick answer of, okay, during that cap, what do we see? A majority of our traffic was all HTTP, so more than likely it was a web-based transfer. And we can drill down further to figure out what people are doing within the web, within the different views in here as well. So one of the other things that we find very helpful is the expert events. And the expert events gives us an idea of things that may be occurring on the network, again, without having to in Wireshark, typically you'll leverage the color coding here to jump ahead and see, okay, look, we've got a bunch of non-response or no response found here. We got some retransmissions that are occurring on the network. But knowing to jump from here, there's no quick summary view. Again, we can use statistics, of course, and where is it? We can look at a flow graph to give us an idea of how much traffic is going through as it processes. But really, there's not a central place. You have to keep looking within the statistics to jump around to where you need to find the information that you're looking at. Whereas within Omnipeek, you have, for example, repeated connection attempts. We can see here very simply that server port 489 was trying to get communicated. We see 2 packets going back and forth, and if I want to take one of those and just double click, I get a simple bounce diagram that show the time it went, and basically it tries to keep connecting, right? So it sends a SYN, it sends another SYN. It's very easy to visualize and actually see what occurred within that particular case. The other example that we'll look at next is we'll jump into a little bit of voice over IP and illustrate the same thing. So I could leave this tab open and we can bounce back to it just in case. Let's go to simple calls. And let's do recent foot calls. So we've got 2 traces which are identically the same here. Both are VoIP traces. One of the key things, again, going back to the visualizations and kind of hitting home on the visualization, is there's the voice and video tab. Voice and video tab gives me a high-level summary of what's taken place, total number of calls, how much jitter, how much packet loss, just a myriad. In this case, this was taken from a voice network, looking at many different things from a voice perspective. So we'll jump into Wireshark and we'll leverage telephony. And we're going to have to look into 2 separate areas within Wireshark. We can look at the SIT piece of it, which is the flows and the statistics that took place. So we see our calls here. We see how many packets completed in call. We do see 1 call that was rejected. If we wanted to, we could get all packets and kind of focus on that. But the one key thing to remember is, obviously, when you're dealing with voice works a lot like FTP, in the sense that there are 2 protocols that we're going to be dealing with. One is the actual control piece of it, and the second piece is the RTP stream or the voice piece of it. So setting up the call and then the actual transferring of the data back and forth. So trying to marry, right, both of those and see those visually become a key part in how you do your analysis here. Again, if I wanted to analyze the RTP streams, I would come into here, click the RTP streams, and I would see that information. Obviously, things that are highlighted in yellow indicate something is amiss. So, for example, either packet loss or delta time or max jitter has been affected here. But as we're sitting there, there's nothing to tell me which actual call. Well, there are ways to tell by the SSRC what call is taking place, but it's not as simple as a simple view coming into here and either looking at it from a calls perspective, where I can see the jitter and the low MOS score. For example, I can highlight here and see the actual calls and the phone numbers that took place, versus the other way where I'm going to break it down and select packets. A lot of what I'm trying to do here is illustrate where you can get the high-level information without digging deep into the packets first, so you can know where to start. And I think that's really the key of what I'm trying to emphasize here. Many times you need a good starting pace, and people will jump directly into a decode and say, oh, look, you know, here we are in a packet decode, here's the information that you need, and get really deep. but there's always that initial step, like how did you know to even go to that direction? And most time when people are giving examples, it's because they've crafted a packet file. There's something very explicit that they've learned from. They filtered out all of the other data and brought you in there. And the goal here really is to say, okay, let's pretend we don't know anything, right? Let's start with, here's a random trace file. Let's open it up and let's see how fast we can get the information that we need to know. Are we dealing with voice? Are we dealing with data? Are we dealing with a web application? Are we dealing with, what are we dealing with? And these key views gives us an idea of what we're looking at. So if you ever do consulting, or if you ever have somebody who says, something's not working and you have to be the referee, right? Being able to have all of that data and build a picture of what's occurring on that network, what types of services are running on that network easily, quickly, and being able to respond in real time becomes a very critical and a key aspect of all of this. And it helps you not only explain what's occurring. So if you can use these visualizations to explain, okay, for example, you're talking about your bandwidth being slow. Well, you're transferring all of this data and you have a bandwidth cap. You want to go faster. Obviously there's more analysis that needs to be done, right? Did you hit a window size that the application can't handle transferring it further? Is it a limitation of the protocol? All of those things come into place, but at least you can start to say, okay, look, we do see that there is merit, right? We do see that there's a cap here. We see that it's going straight across. Now let's look a little bit deeper into what's occurring. Or you're having a problem connecting. I see repeated connection attempts. I can tell you that your port's not open. I can tell that within 30 seconds here. And that's really what I think out of what I want people to take away from. There is nothing to say that you can't do this in the other products out there today, or even the free products. The question is how fast can you do it? How comfortable do you feel? Does the view and the application flow make sense to you? And does it help you get to the answers that you need to get to? And I think with that, I'll turn it over to Matt, see if we have any questions out there.
Hey, thanks, Joe. We haven't had too many questions come in just yet, but sometimes that takes a little bit to come to mind. If you can, flip over to the PowerPoint. I'll just cover our actions for today's slide while people have a chance to go ahead and submit those questions in, and then we'll address them.
So actually, I'll leave you with one last thing. I left this for the last bit of it, saying that relationships are hard work. That's the myth. The fact is a relationship with the wrong person is actually the hard work here. And that's where I wanted to encourage you to pick a product that actually works for you and actually helps you get what you need done. So with that said, I'll jump over here and let's take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. I just want to let everybody know we do have another webinar coming up next week. That's going to be a little bit more security focused, but if you're interested, go ahead and head over to our website and register for that webinar as well. Again, we'll be sending out a follow-up email that will contain a recording of this webinar if you'd like to review it. And the handouts tab, there is a PowerPoint slide that has a link to all of the Wireshark versus Omnipeek comparing videos that we did over the last year or so. And you can check those out as well. They really build on top of what Joe was going through here in today's slides. All right, I think we have a couple of questions coming in. Is there a way to hear the voice of calls, actually hear the voice?
Yep. So within a voice call itself, you can simply right-click and say playback options. So play voice in the audio. The key here is understanding that there is voice within the media type that you're actually playing back. So you can play back audio there, and then again within Wireshark, Wireshark has the same capabilities. Oops. That's the other thing with Wireshark. You've got different windows, so making sure that you're going to the correct window. But within telephony, you can actually play back calls as well. So once you have a call, you can play audio streams as well. So both applications do have it. It's, you know, how you want to go about it.
Perfect. The next question we have is they would like to do a search or search a word in the packet details, like
Mhm.
MFP protocol. How can I do that in Savvius Omnipeek? He does it in Wireshark, but he's not sure how to do it with Omnipeek.
So there's a couple of different ways of going about it. One thing that you can do, just if you're a Wireshark user and you're typical used to using the Wireshark filter format, let me just close a couple of windows here and bounce back to Wireshark. Let's say you've got a filter that you'd like to invoke. So let's see, TCP only TCP. That's not a good one, sorry. I'll take this one just to give you an example. But let's say you want to leverage one of your Wireshark filters. You can actually simply copy and paste. And then there is what's known as this filter bar up here. You can simply paste that filter bar. What did I do? I thought previously we could put in the BPF filter format. May have something wrong in the syntax. Searching for text though, you can simply put in the text as well. And you can also insert additional Omnipeek filters. One thing about the filters that I will bring up, which is kind of a differentiator as well, if you go to view your filters within Omnipeek, jumping into Omnipeek and double-clicking on a filter, the filter visualization leverages Boolean logic and builds kind of a picture out. So it's a logic tree diagram versus the text base that you typically see within Wireshark as well. So taking advantage of that. But back to the original question, putting in typically a search string, you know, whatever it may be, you know, you can type that in, hit enter, and you can decide whether you want to highlight the packets, select the packets, or actually copy them and move them to a new window. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thanks, Joe. There's another question here on what is contained in the event log? Is it a listing of events that is summarized in the events tab?
Are we talking about the summary or which events?
You know, I'm not sure. Maybe the person who asked that question could clarify a bit more.
Because there are quite a bit of events with listed in different areas within the product. Some events are actually labeled within the event summary within the expert. Some get summarized within summary statistics and so forth. So these events are all driven off of summary statistics from Event Finder settings, and those Event Finder settings can be customized or specialized depending on what the user wants to either enable or what type of threshold settings they want to set. So this becomes being able to customize events to your specific you know, environments or thresholds that you find valuable. But the key with the Event Finder settings, I think in the expert statistics is where they were going, is the ability to export and import out those as well. So for different environments, you can have different threshold settings. They may have also been talking about this specific event log, which is coming through typically in real time as data is occurring. And this data can actually be sent to third-party systems if you were so inclined to kind of leverage this data and tie it into some type of graphing or charting application as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And he was indeed talking about the events log tab, so that was good. Next question, and I know that we have our head of products, Jay Patello, lurking in the background a little bit here. This question might be best addressed by him. But this gentleman's on the call saying he has Omnipeek but doesn't have the web and voice and video features. He's running Omnipeek Professional. He's curious of how he could get those dashboards. I believe it's just an upgrade to Omnipeek Enterprise, but Jay, do you want to confirm that?
Yeah, that's correct, Matt. That's one of the few differences between Omnipeek Professional and Omnipeek Enterprise. Omnipeek Enterprise includes the voice and video the voice and media dashboards, as well as all of the web views. As Joe's showing there, you can see on the left hand side the web views, and then underneath that the voice and video, where it's calls and media. Those are sets of dashboards that are only available in Enterprise, and it is a simple upgrade. If he's truly interested in an upgrade, he could just send a quick email or get back to you through the chat or even later in email. We could certainly work that out.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Jay. We have another question here. They're talking about how it's very useful to sort packets on a column. They're able to do this in Wireshark, but they're not really sure how to do it in Omnipeek. Could you give them a quick demonstration of that, Joe?
Yeah, so typically sorting packets, my personal preference, and I'm going to preface this, typically you would not want to sort packets. You want packets to come in the way that they are, so you keep them in their integrity. What you're really trying to do is isolate out certain types of packets. So in some cases you may say, I want everything for maybe this particular node, right? So being able to select related packets, and basically if I wanted it all by the source, because you're sorting by the source, and copy that to a new window, will give you that same sorting experience where everything is sorted now by that particular source. If you're trying to source by, you can basically do select related on anything from a packet perspective. So you can either do it from, typically people are looking at either nodes and protocols, and they're trying to isolate out data. So for example, let me sort by CIFS because I want all the CIFS data. So I think select related and going directly to where the statistic relies, and I'm just using nodes and protocols because that's the typical thing that people will do, because they want to bring everything all together from either a node or a MAC address. One thing I probably didn't show from a nodes perspective is, how do you go ahead and get this particular view where you're not showing an IP address versus physical. So if I wanted to look at things from a physical perspective, using the views to kind of change around the data to make it easy to go ahead and sort. So. And we can do all of that from within the packets view as well. So we can do select related from within the deep packet as well. So anyways, hopefully that helps.
Outstanding. Next question we have here is, are there any limitations on reading the packet dump via TCP dump? Is there a preferred way to create a dump file for the tool to read? I believe he's speaking towards Omnipeek there.
Yeah, so Omnipeek can read Wireshark traces, and that's kind of where I was going, is kind of starting out that if you're in a pinch and you need to get a trace file quickly, and maybe you don't have Omnipeek installed on that machine, being able to load Wireshark, get a trace, and then basically opening up that Wireshark trace within Omnipeek is a viable option as well. So the supported format, Wireshark supported file format, is actually able to open, and vice versa, taking a Omnipeek file and opening it within Wireshark as well is possible as well.
Awesome. And then, Joe, we do also have the TCP Dump Adapter, right? So people could use that adapter and stream packets directly from any box running TCP dump back into Omnipeek.
Correct. And that kind of speaks to the remote capability. So as we were talking about some of the limits of free, the remote capabilities, TCP dump is just one of those remote capabilities that we mentioned. One of the others is leveraging the engine. And the engine allows you to do captures at remote sites, but all of the analysis is done at that remote site. So one of the key things is your load distribution, if you will, of the analysis and the heavy lifting is all done at that remote site versus trying to bring everything back to a central location where that's basically what you'd be doing with the TCP Dump Adapter. The other piece of it is the forensics ability. So let's say you wanted to, have a long-term capture going over time, and then being able to search through those packets and see kind of what took place during those times as well.
Fantastic. Joe, I know we're over our time limit here. We're about 5 minutes past our half-an-hour mark. We do have quite a few other questions coming in. Do you have time to answer a few more questions?
I probably have it for maybe one or two, but I'm going to need to run fairly shortly. So
understood. We'll wrap up with one last question here, if that's okay.
Yep.
All right. We have one question on how to search for a DNS name, requesting by using the filter. For example, they're saying www.google.com.
Yep. So there's a couple of different ways to go about it. One, obviously, it depends whether you're using it from a protocol that you already have. So one way, I like to use examples, right? So for example, if I go through and I grab protocols and grab DNS and select related packets, copy those to a new window. So now I've done that whole isolation and sorting of all of those DNS packets. I can come into here, look at the packets itself, go ahead and look specifically at here and make a filter. So that's one way of doing it, where I'm looking for a specific pattern in this case. So it grabbed the first piece of it, set the offset and everything. I could simply just do a simple pattern filter, right, where I'm just looking for default text. The pattern is www.joe.com, and maybe I don't even look at any offset, so I leave it completely open. In fact, let me just digital.com. And I'm just now looking for that complete string, right? So name. And now I can actually, use that as a filter bar. I can come up here, use it as a display filter. There's different ways of going about it. So there's a lot of simple ways of going ahead and looking text searches. But the filters typically, cancel. The filters give you the ability to get very granular to go ahead and do that as well. So a lot of different ways of solving the problem. It depends on what you're most familiar with and what, are you looking for something repeatedly, or is it something just kind of an ad hoc search where, you want to look for a domain name there, either make a filter or select related packets and go ahead and go from there.
Outstanding. Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining us today.